Hello, Laurie, Sullivan here. I'd like to present a case for you of an onlay lamellar keratoplasty with a tuck-in flange in this lady who has keratoglobus with quite thin peripheral cornea through about 360 degrees. She's had a hydrops and that's healed, but her cornea is quite thin and obviously Descemet's membrane is not intact. The topography here, I'm highlighting the thin areas where the cornea is quite thin, infranasally and temporally, and that's seen also on the pachymetry analysis scan here. So planning the surgery here was really, I was thinking of a two-part procedure, a lamellar onlay to reinforce and an optical PK down the track. Here you see the eye at surgery. She's had a block and there's a bit of chemosis. I've pressed the 10mm Trefine onto the cornea already and just checked my positioning, and now I'm just making a little bit of trephination to be a guide for my manual dissection. I'm using a crescent knife here just to go around the entire circumference of the initial trephination and just deepen it enough so that I can do a lamellar dissection. The plan is to dissect peripherally to create a pocket into which I can put a 10mm graft with a 1mm flange around the outside that will tuck in and reinforce the peripheral cornea. Aware that some of the peripheral cornea is quite thin, so I'm keen not to perforate if I can help it. I'm examining the gutter there at the 12 o'clock position and it looks sufficiently deep, so I'm going to start my lamellar dissection with the crescent knife. I often use a crescent knife to commence the dissection and then use a Morley splitter, a lamellar dissector, which is semi-sharp, to continue. And here you can see me doing that. A slow and tedious process, and one needs a fair bit of patience when you're doing a case like this. It's quite thin inferiorly, and so I'm keen to get a good dissection there. I'm wanting to take out the dissection at least 1 millimetre from the 10mm zone, and so I'm undermining really under the limbus there. Now it's time to do the lamellar dissection of the host cornea centrally, and again it's a combination of crescent knife and lamellar dissector that I use. I'm quite aware that where the scar is from the previous hydrops, the cornea is likely to be very thin and there's a fair chance of perforating, so I've had a plan in mind with regard to that, which is to use to dissect from periphery to central, and if need be use some gas in the anterior chamber if there is a perforation. The artificial anterior chamber to prepare the donor tissue, and I'm going to match the diameter of the central trephination, the 10mm trephination, with a 12mm peripheral trephination to give us the reinforcing flange to be tucked into the lamellar dissection in the periphery of the host cornea. Again, I'm just using the Trefine to mark and to check that I have the centration appropriate, and once I've done that, I then again manually deepen the 10mm cut through 360 degrees so that I can then remove the peripheral anterior lamella for a good match between the two pieces of tissue. Doing the 12mm peripheral trephination, and now just dissecting away the peripheral anterior lamella. Once I've excised the entirety of the button with the curved corneal scissors, I then still need to trim the peripheral edge of the flange with the Van Ness scissors here, as you can see me doing, just to make sure there's not quite a thick peripheral graft to be inserted into the lamellar space. Host tissue now, and continuing dissection, expecting a gush of fluid at any time. Trying to go slowly and bluntly. And there was our gush of fluid. So now I'm making a peripheral paracentesis to inject some gas into the anterior chamber to reform the anterior chamber to allow me to continue the dissection. Stripping the endothelium from the donor tissue, initially using a sponge and then confirming with the crescent knife that the endothelium's all been removed, placing the graft, and then I'll assess its positioning and what else I need to do to make it match. Just think it needs a slight rotation there. 360-degree flange looks pretty good, needs a little bit of a trim. Just a final repositioning rotation. In the sutures, I'm trying to pick up some of the peripheral flange tissue as well to help encourage it to position quite peripherally within the lamellar space that I've made. Like a 1-1-1-1 suturing technique, which allows me to use a slipping knot initially to adjust the tension. I'm really just trying to snug up the edges of that 10mm trephination so that they are apposed without too much tension. The eye is fairly soft at the moment, so you will see a little bit of distortion once that suturing is completed. Now with the suturing completed and the knots buried, it's time to adjust the size of the air bubble in the anterior chamber to avoid pupil block. And so I'll aspirate a little bit of the gas and then re-inject some BSS. Post-op day 1, the graft is well opposed with a 60% gas bubble. The broken suture has been removed at 1 o'clock. The pupil's dilated and the pressure's normal. The OCT shows a well opposed lamellar graft with no false AC. Thanks very much for watching.